Sudbury Mining Monument was actually the first large-scale sculpture that I created. It's around 15 feet. I initially worked the piece in clay, and I wanted to put as much of the mining experience within one piece as possible. The general shape of the sculpture is described by two humongous hands that are reaching into the ground, reaching into the natural resources and pulling them out. And from these two hands, more than 900 miners come down into the ground. And so by the use of perspective, I created a sculpture that looks quite a lot bigger than the 15 feet. The miners at the top are about the size of your finger, 3 inches, and then they merge down into becoming life-size figures. And the interesting thing is, right at the top of the monument, you have a city scene. Actually, some of the buildings are buildings that would be familiar to most people in Sudbury. And then from the city, the miners come down. And by using photographs, I got pretty much an accurate depiction on some of the modern tools that the miners use, the drills and whatnot. It was interesting to put so many miners within the piece. And I also got to do a lot of different expressions. I wanted to make each one of these figures look like real people and with distinct characteristics. On the back of the piece, basically instead of leaving it blank, what I did was I created all of the history of mining, the old timers, the miners that had the candlesticks on their hats back then, and with the old pick and axe. And so it's almost like behind the piece is what you have behind the history of the mining industry in Canada. It was an amazing project. It probably took me about a year to complete it. After the piece was done in a clay, it was cast in bronze. The fingertips actually had huge steel beams in that were drilled right within the granite in Sudbury. And the installation was pretty nerve-wracking for myself, having this monument that's around 3 tons going into the earth there. That was my first largest piece, and there was a little bit of fear that went along with doing something as large as 15 feet. And it wasn't only large at the scale, but it was large in the scope of the idea. To create a sculpture that literally has 900 figures in it is something that I've never seen before. So for me, it's a challenge. I've been sculpting for 20 years, and at that time of my life, I really wanted to transgress everything I did previous with complexity. So this was the design I basically went for. A piece that large, I'd have the foundry basically next door to me. So the bronzing would happen just next door to this huge studio I was basically living in for 3 months. I would leave only once a day to exercise, and the rest of the whole day till nightfall I'd be working on this piece. And I actually had a couple other pieces during the same time, and I would just sleep in the corner on a mattress and wake up and start the whole thing over again. 3 months of doing that. A lot of the work for the Sudbury Mining Monument, because of its height, I had to actually spend hour upon hour, days on scaffolding, and I'd have my assistants bring me up little Tupperware dishes full of food, and I would eat my food, throw the Tupperware down the scaffold, and stick with the piece up there, basically 10 feet above the ground there. And the idea about working that intense 15-hour days, living in the studio, I basically had to, because when you're working on a big clay piece like this, it dries, and if you don't get it done within a finite period of time, what happens is it starts to crack, heads fall off, arms crack, huge chunks can fall off. So I'm kind of competing with myself with the time to make sure it's finished, and then the rubber goes on and it's safe. But it was a very exciting project to work on there. But it was an amazing experience creating the piece, because I believe that mining is quite a bit of our Canadian heritage, and to do a sculpture that really celebrates the history and that part of our culture was a real honor to me. And the idea of creating such a massive amount of figures within it was a challenge for myself. I wanted to do something that would look like it was done in the Renaissance, and so it took a lot of energy. By the time I was finished it, I was literally exhausted, but it was well worth the energy that I put in to have this piece. I think it was 10 years ago that I created the piece when I was 30, so it's nice to know that these pieces will be around forever.